Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with another episode of Science Without Consensus. I am your host, Diamond, from the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. And joining us tonight is my lovely co-host and partner, Leah Shaper.
Hello.
Welcome to the program. We've got a banger of a show today. We are going to be talking about a topic that has hit the headlines in recent days because lots of the headlines are sharing that meteorites contain all the building blocks necessary for DNA. And so that leads to the question of panspermia. And also, if we have time, we might even get into the philosophical argument of panspermia of like, where is this coming from? Or where did it originate? Because that's the question. If life didn't originate here and it's all throughout outer space, where is it coming from? And I think the philosophical argument there is pretty simple. Our life experience is so minuscule. We've talked about this, that we can't fathom infinity, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the big problem. And at the end of the show, if we have time, we'll get into lightning formation because a lot of new papers coming out are claiming that they know how lightning is initiated and it has to do with space weather. And last week, the longest lightning bolt recorded in history was confirmed at 515 miles long, and it occurred in October of 2017. They just got the data from GOES-16 satellite, which is up there to look at lightning, and they deciphered it. A 515-mile long lightning bolt from Texas through Missouri. Isn't that crazy?
Wow. I mean, I kind of wonder how you track something like that, right? Because there's so many lightning strikes. Like, how do you know if you really have the longest one? You could have easily missed a longer one.
Yeah, well, since the satellite was up, so since like 2015, let's say.
Oh, okay, so this is a satellite recording. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense.
And it beat the last record, which was a bolt, I think, in 2021, which was like 470 miles. This one's much bigger, and they have a 3D animation of the whole bolt and all its fingers. That's what they got from the satellite data. So we'll get into that. Anything else before we jump in?
Yeah, well, I just want to mention that I don't know why this building blocks of life in meteorites is hitting the news now, because the most recent paper that was written about this was actually 3 years ago.
Yeah, I was going to say this is 2 or 3 years old, this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's other work that has been done in this area long before.
Well, I think because journalism is dead, and what we tend to get is every few years a rehashing of what was already said again and again, and you look into it and you're like, that's old.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you're sitting around as like a journalist and you're like, what can I report on that will cause a splash that no one's talked about in a while?
Exactly. All right, so let's dive into it. Panspermia. You can see that screen, can't you? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I turned off my mic as I was coughing.
Okay.
That's why I was nodding heartily.
All right, panspermia. Many people claim as a fringe theory that life permeates the universe and gave rise to life on Earth. The mainstream hypothesis, and the word panspermia is from the ancient Greek. Pan is all and sperma is seed. This is a hypothesis that life exists throughout the universe, distributed by space dust, meteoroids, asteroids, comets, or planetoids, as well as spacecraft carrying unintended contamination by microorganisms. That type is known as directed panspermia. The theory argues that life did not originate on Earth, but instead evolved somewhere else and seeded life as we know it. Now, I have a problem with that. Let me share this tab instead. I have a problem with that because life as we know it today is different than life 200 million years ago when it was predominantly dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
So who's to say what life is going to manifest on any planet?
Well, and also who's to say that there aren't forms of life that are significantly different than what we know?
Yeah, that we're completely unaware of.
Right. And I'll get into this later, but I partially say that because the main discovery of this paper that we're going to talk about is the existence of nucleobases in meteorites. Now, our DNA and RNA only uses 5 of those nucleobases, but there's many more. So
life could be manifesting in all forms. And in fact, if we didn't have the study of geology and paleontology, we wouldn't know about hundreds of millions of things that existed that don't exist today at all.
Mhm.
And that's just on our planet. And
Mhm.
we probably are only in the fossil record really picking up a fraction of what was here, 1%. I mean, that could
Right.
be a generous amount, especially when it comes to larger vertebrates. Like there's almost no fossil evidence of hominids going back 3 million years. We just have a few teeth, finger bones. I mean, there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it boggles the mind, the
Well, it's not that
possibilities.
there's not a lot there. There's just not a lot that we've actually discovered. That's the hypothesis, right? That
Right. And with
there's
that being known, just consider how many tens of millions of species are alive right now in the United States.
Mhm.
And we don't know, maybe double that exists that we don't even know about.
Right. Right.
So it's
Which, I mean,
mind-boggling.
considering the amount of like material that belongs to organisms right now, right? And if assuming that there was a huge plethora of organisms at some long time in the past that are very different than today, I mean, it's like, where did all that go, right? I mean, obviously some of it disintegrates beyond recognition. A lot of it does. It's the same problem that we have with, we mark hominid development in part by finding lithic tools, stone tools, right? But we also have learned that there were wooden tools that significantly predate some of these stone tools. We just don't find a lot of them because they disintegrate. It's the same problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're wood.
Right.
So panspermia can come in multivariate forms. You can literally have bacteria or viruses enter the atmosphere, make it through, and land on the surface, right? That's the simplest way. You bring life here and you drop it on the surface.
Right. Well,
And then
and go ahead. Sorry.
and then hopefully, miraculously, the right conditions exist where that can replicate and grow. That's the panspermia part. That's the seed, and then you get the life. And then from that, from what we know, like on Earth, we had a single form of life for billions of years in the form of an algae, which got a little bit more complex and started layering into mounds called thrombolites. But then after that, boom, we got millions of species out of
Mhm.
nowhere in the
Mhm.
Cambrian explosion. And
Mhm.
almost all of them disappeared completely. We don't even have any of that type of animal alive today. And it keeps repeating like that. Every 100 million years, we get a whole new group of stuff.
Mhm.
And that may have to do with the conditions on Earth, the biome changing.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, that pattern alone speaks very strongly of um, kind of a nurture versus nature thing, right? That the conditions need to be right for whatever particular kind of organism to exist, and that plays a huge role in whatever exists at any particular moment. I mean, maybe that seems obvious, but I kind of feel like our current picture of the evolution of life on Earth is very nature based, that it's all generated from the genetic material, but I'm not sure how true that really is, right? Because if we have explosions of certain kind of life that later go away, it suggests, well, the conditions were right for that life, and then later the conditions were not. It's not all self-determined, so to speak.
Exactly. And the possibilities are endless. If you just look into our own fossil record here on Earth in the last 500 million years, we've had some of the most bizarre creatures ever. In the Burgess Shale, back in the Cambrian, there is a whole explosion of animals that are completely psychedelic with 12 sets of eyes and legs. One creature's name is hallucinogenia because it's so bizarre. Other creature names Wixwaxia. These are just bizarre animals that we have no modern analog for. We have no idea how they came to be, but they came to be in this Cambrian Ocean overnight. So all there is algae for billions of years. And then the next day, there are 800 bizarre animals populating our oceans. Where
Mhm.
did they come from?
Right.
And now we have a living alien on Earth. It's called the octopus. It has such ancient DNA. They don't know like where this thing came from and why it's still alive. This is another that maybe there is an octopus world out there.
Right. Well, and the other thing, if I recall correctly, and I hope this is correct, that with octopus, one of the mysteries is if you look at their genetics and you look at their most recent predecessor, like there appears to be a kind of a huge gap in the genetic evolution, as if we're like missing a bunch of ancestors in between. So that's the other thing that's kind of interesting about them. Something else I wanted to say, kind of going with my previous point about nurture versus nature, that this isn't entirely, it's not entirely self-determined. I guess the other way of looking at that would be, in some respects, this maybe speaks somewhat against Darwinian evolution concepts, right? Like, so when we're talking about a period of time where we have really bizarre creatures with 12 eyes and etc., I think the narrative is typically like, well, it's like a trial and error thing. Like nature is seeing like what will work, and the 12 tardigrade and the 12 eyes didn't work, so nature panned it down to like 2 eyes. But I don't know that that's necessarily true. It could have been that the conditions at the time of the creature with 12 eyes, that the 12 eyes really worked, but the conditions have changed now. Right. So you can really use this to argue against Darwinian concepts. And that's kind of the framework within which we live right now.
Yeah. And how do you get this? This is a tardigrade.
Right.
How does this come to be? It almost looks manufactured because of the way the geometry of the snout there.
Mm-hmm.
It almost looks like a gas cap or some type of a gear.
Right. I think it also looks weird simply because this is so microscopic. You've blown this image up so much that it sort of just inherently looks very bizarre when you blow it up like this.
Now they've taken these guys to space and they were able to reanimate them back here on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them made it, but you don't have to have all of them make it to have life moving around a solar system or a universe. You just have to have some of it make it.
Right.
That's the whole point of it. Go ahead.
I mean, but most importantly, this is a creature that can survive, very low temperatures, very, very, very low pressures, essentially being able to survive in a vacuum.
Yep.
I mean, it's how did this thing come to be? And
it's not the only, these are called extremophiles, and it's not the only one. There's many we've discovered that you can literally dehydrate them forever and then reanimate them at a later date.
Right. So. Well, and we've revived this isn't exactly on the same topic, but we revived a nematode from, I don't remember how long ago, like
40, the one was 40-something thousand
years old. Right. And we revived it and it's reproducing. I mean, life can really exceed our expectations, but the tardigrade, it's like, if Darwinian evolution is true, then where did this thing come from? And why did it develop the ability to survive space? You know what I mean? Like, if that's the model, then from that, you would have to say that this thing actually comes from space.
Exactly.
Because there's no reason for it to have these qualities on Earth.
And scientists discovered exposed bacteria can survive in space for years. An experiment conducted outside the International Space Station leads to a controversial theory about how life might have traveled between planets. That's pretty interesting. Yeah. And that is not the only case, right?
Right. I mean, this is a bacteria that survived for 3 years on the surface of the ISS in true space conditions. So if anyone doubts the idea that a bacteria or a virus might actually, make it in space or through our atmosphere, I mean, because there's also that it was discovered on the, I was thinking of the Challenger, the Columbia shuttle.
A slow-growing, heat-resistant bacteria identified by 16S RNA gene sequencing as microbispora. was recovered from the wreckage of the ill-fated shuttle Columbia. And the organism survived disintegration of the spacecraft, heat of reentry, and impact. Holy macaroni.
Right. Like how, I mean, that's, we tend to think that, no microorganism can survive, part of our sterilization process, right, is using extreme heat. Well, in this case, you're not going to be able to sterilize for this bacteria, apparently.
Yeah.
If it can make it through reentry. So,
right. So we've only talked about one type of panspermia, and that's actual life surviving the reentry. And we have scientific evidence to back up the notion that this is possible. So it should be in textbooks as a theory, a very substantial theory that we are aliens and all life is alien, essentially.
Did you say earlier that the term for this is direct panspermia? Was that the term?
Don't quote me on it. Yeah,
okay. Directed, okay.
Yeah, directed panspermia.
Right. So in this case, obviously we're dealing with organisms that are already formed, bacteria, viruses. So they have their own DNA. It already exists. And somehow they're making it through the atmosphere of Earth. It's like, it's kind of like talking about like the blood-brain barrier or something, right? That is supposed to filter all of these things, but it doesn't entirely work. So that tells us right there that life on Earth is connected to life elsewhere in the universe on some level.
Exactly. And so how do you get this how do you get the diversification of species that we get on our planet? That's the question. And so if you're only bringing one thing to a solar system or a planet in a solar system, like one bacteria, how does it diversify? And I think what you need is more building blocks of DNA on that planet. And so you can get that by the other type of panspermia that we're about to talk about. And it's that these asteroids, on the surface of them, because of the interaction as it's moving through space and the cosmic radiation, there is some type of reaction happening on the surface that creates the precursors to DNA.
Well, right. I mean, there's a couple of levels on which this happens. So, I mean, this is the media about the 2022 research, which is not exactly new. There's other research that has been done in this arena where meteorites have been analyzed. In 2022, there was a better technology for analyzing the meteorites that was less destructive to the material in the meteorites. So what this research found is that all of the nucleobases that are involved in DNA and RNA on Earth were found in this meteorite. So can I backtrack here on a little bit of a chemistry lesson? So any DNA and RNA is made up of nucleotides. A nucleotide is a sugar connected to a nucleobase and also a phosphate group. RNA is very similar. It just uses a different sugar, ribose versus deoxyribose. So the nucleobases are the things that you would have learned about, like maybe in high school biology. It's the A meets the T and the G meets the C. It's the adenine, thionine, cytosine, uracil, adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, and uracil. RNA uses uracil instead of thymine. So all those 5 nucleobases have been found in these meteorites. Now, there was some previous research that found some of these in meteorites. There are other nucleobases, many others, that were also found in these meteorites, which is really fascinating. Because it's like, why are they there? How did they form? Where did they come from? I mean, and to me, this just suggests that those nucleobases are They're all over our solar system, at least. They're probably all over the universe, but they're completely critical to building DNA and RNA. We can't have it without that. But something else that's really fascinating. So I described the nucleotide as being three different things put together. You've got the sugar, the phosphate group, and the nucleobase. There's also something called a nucleoside, which is basically just the precursor to the nucleotide because it's missing the phosphate group. So somebody did an experiment in 2002, and other people have done work in this area too, where they took nucleosides and phosphates and they put them on like the same film, and then they treated them with high energy protons, and what they got were the nucleotides. So in other words, the space energy is providing the energy to make the nucleotides that are the precursor to the genetic material. Now, there's other ways you can do this. You can do it with gamma rays, apparently, and heat and some other things I don't recall right now. But
Well,
I mean,
and all
clearly
that
you can
stuff,
do this in space.
all that stuff is out in space.
Right. And more importantly, the energy in space that kind of is kind of critical to their formation. So that's kind of interesting to me too, because without the high energies in space, we need that is critical to life. That's what that's basically telling me. I think we already know that, right? Just by virtue of the fact that the sun is critical to life on Earth. In some respect, it's not that different. But there's something happening, in the entire universe. I mean, all of this together says to me, like, in essence, life is part of the universe and always has been. These building blocks are in space because they're everywhere.
Well, they're being created by the space environment. That is even more mind-blowing. So it's as if the universe is creating the building blocks of life in between solar systems.
Yes.
And then delivering it in a big way. Think about it. This is the moon. We know about hundreds of millions of impacts just from the craters we can see on the moon, which suggests that all of the planetary bodies and moons in our solar system have been impacted millions of times. And what this provides is a layer on the entire surface of the building blocks of DNA. That is insane.
Well, more than that, it's not just that they found the nucleobases in these meteorites. And there's a little bit more to that too that I'd like to mention because it's important. But they also have found sugars and even amino acids, which is kind of blows my mind. So it's not like you could maybe argue like, oh, well, finding the nucleobases in the meteorites doesn't really mean anything. But when you start finding the other building blocks of nucleotides as well, like, again, all of the material is out there and it can be put together using high energies. But also they checked, they took a look at, because there was the possibility, because we're talking about meteorites that have landed on Earth, right? So there's the possibility that the meteorites picked up the nucleobases from Earth itself. So they kind of looked at that, and for the purines, which are adenine and guanine, I think if I recall correctly, they found more of that in the meteorites than in Earth. And generally speaking, for the pyrimidines, which is cytosine and thymine and uracil, I think they found less. But more importantly, in the meteorites, they found isomers of those nucleobases. So it's the same chemical structure, but in often it'll be like in a mirrored structural arrangement. And those isomers do not exist on Earth. So that tells you that at least some of this material that they found in the meteorites is extraterrestrial.
Yeah, the original argument against by other scientists were like, these meteorites hit the Earth, and it was the Earth that created these pieces of DNA on the surface. They did not come from space. But the new research has found isomers that don't exist here.
Well, and there's some, and I don't know if it's been done yet, but there's some planned research that maybe has already happened by now as well to look at material from the surface of asteroids. So material that was out in space, brought to Earth, but kept contained, to see if we find any similar materials, because that would not be contaminated by Earth itself.
Yeah. So,
and the other thing that they could do too is they could look at the like the nitrogen isotopes, for example, in these nucleobases, to see, you know, if the ratio of isotopes matches what's on Earth. Because if it doesn't, that also tells us that it's extraterrestrial.
yeah. So the big picture is developing. The question of how do you get life? Well, life is ubiquitous, and you just need a planet that cools down enough, that has atmosphere or something to support life, and life is delivered to the planet. First, it's bombarded for millions of years, hundreds of millions, maybe billions of years. It survives a billion impacts, spreading these building block parts all across the planet in a layer on the surface. And then at some point, an actual life form gets delivered. I was going to say develop. It gets delivered here like a tardigrade or a germ or a bacteria comes from a rock. And that is the spark. That bacteria lives and spreads. And then because there's other building blocks of DNA, it changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you got enough time, you got people on a podcast. I mean, that takes a lot of time to get here, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the most interesting things to me about this, it's the first thing that you said, that life, this is what this was showing us, is that life is ubiquitous, right? Because one of man's biggest, there's two really big questions for human beings, probably philosophically, that have persisted forever is, you know, when and how does life begin? How does it start? Right? It's the question of the story of Frankenstein, right? How do we get animated, and how does life come into being from just these compounds? And the other question is how did the universe begin? And I think that in both cases, all of the evidence that we've looked at keeps pointing to the idea that there wasn't ever a beginning, is that it was always here. It's infinite. Just like space is infinite, that there is no starting point, which is hard to wrap your head around as a human being because you live in linear time. You know, like
Right,
for us, for each individual being, we have a beginning and an end, at least in our
just
physical
based on the
form.
paleontology, we know that there are probably billions of potential species that have been on Earth just in the last 500 million years, means based on the premise that there are infinite life forms. We will never know them all because it's infinite, and it depends on conditions. It depends on it's basically environmentally controlled, in my opinion.
Right.
Whatever
Well,
the
and
environment is, will adjust the life forms to suit it.
right. I mean, it's and this is, I think maybe this is part of the illusion, right? Like there is the big question of how did life start on Earth, right? And I think we've partially answered that, which is that the conditions had to be correct. Obviously, we needed the materials here, but that just because the conditions didn't always exist on Earth for life doesn't mean that life didn't exist before that.
Exactly.
It's the same way that we think that everything has a beginning and an end because our own individual physical lives have a beginning and an end. But perhaps that's just an illusion of being in the physical plane.
I think in the very near future, we're going to visit Enceladus or another moon, an icy moon with, these are, targets in astrophysics with the highest potential for life, because there are really good conditions there that life may exist. And a recent paper came out, said that the cosmic rays can penetrate the ice and actually create a molecule that's like food on planet Earth for some other bacteria. So I think we're going to land on Enceladus, go look under the ice, and we're going to be very surprised to find life.
Right.
If it is ubiquitous, it is going to be in some of the most inhospitable places where it could potentially survive. It's going to be there regardless, because if it is there are infinite possibilities. There are also infinite environments where life can exist.
Right. Well, and as this paper shows, that's on the screen right now, again, you don't necessarily need like Earth conditions per se to help create life, but you do need energy, right? And that can change things and create new compounds in and of itself. So if that's part of the picture, then the possibility is certainly there, even if the conditions don't look like they do on Earth.
Right. And even more mind-blowing is that life is created by some of the most dangerous things in our universe, cosmic radiation.
Mm-hmm.
We discuss how it's the only thing we know that can mutate our genes is cosmic rays.
Mm-hmm.
It is the destroyer and it is also the creator.
That's what I was going to say a second ago. I mean, yeah, there's no question that death is life, is death is life, right? This is a repeating pattern in our universe that we should take very seriously for the exact reason that you stated.
And so I think that if it's infinite, and things change through time based on conditions, because we have the paleontological record that's a long, 500 million years of stuff. We can be like, wow, things change dramatically due to the conditions. At one point, our planet had nothing but rainforests that were hundreds of feet high and 8-foot dragonflies. We don't have that anymore. Our dragonflies are 8 inches.
Right.
So something had to change dramatically, and the conditions changed.
Right. Correct. Which again, kind of, in my mind, philosophically, this is taking away from the idea of Darwinian evolution, which I, in some respects, have issues with anyway. But, it kind of tells us that there's a really, really complex interplay between nurture and nature, the conditions. It's not just the organism adapting to the environment. It's also the environment changing.
Well, right. So Gould and Eldridge back in 91 were correct when they suggested punctuated equilibria as a better term for what we're observing in the fossil record. You've got this whole group of different types of animals, and then across a boundary line on the other side, they're all gone and everyone else is different. That doesn't happen through evolution. There is no evolutionary mechanism to do that. But the whole concept of punctuated equilibria, boom, something changes. All the conditions change, and whatever was living before, they can't handle it. And so there are some creatures that have exaptations, which are like things that they didn't need back then, which become useful now. And those are the new lines of life that move forward. They're actually freaks that make it across the boundary, right? They have to have, right. They have to be mutated. And so it's the mutants that repopulate across the boundary in the new conditions.
Well, right. And I mean, this makes sense as well, because as we've discussed here before in connection with punctuated equilibrium, like probably something that plays into that phenomena are things like magnetic reversals and excursions, right? Yeah. When we're suddenly subject to quite a lot of radiation from space and species disappear, like the Neanderthal 42,000 years ago, and other species emerge, right? So that suggests, the same way that we've got higher energy particles and gamma rays, et cetera, putting building blocks together, we also have those things tearing apart, essentially, the genetic material, the DNA, and mutating creatures. At least that's what seems to be happening. That's our working hypothesis.
Right.
So again, the creator and the destroyer, once again.
And then it's also, it's beyond that. It's like God, cosmic rays. They bombard the earth, they kill off whatever was there, and they create a whole new biome through mutation during these events.
Right.
They're also creating the building blocks up there in space that are bombarding the planet. It's such a bizarre story.
You know, I really want to look more into this mention that some of what was discovered in these meteorites were actually amino acids,
Yeah.
because amino acids are formed at the direction of mRNA. So, you know, in that case, there has to be some mRNA out there that's helping to form those amino acids. Like, where is that, and where is that coming from? Right? You know, we only talked about the building blocks of the mRNA and the DNA, you know, being in these meteorites, but apparently there's some amino acids too. So where is that coming from?
Yeah.
You
Probably
know,
from
and
other planets with life on them that got exploded or
maybe, and unless the amino acids are, you know, a function of contamination by Earth. But I would really like to look a little bit more into that. But I mean, clearly there's a fair amount of research being done in looking at meteorites. I'm excited to see whatever the results from asteroids might be. And I'm really glad people are looking for this, because this is it's very exciting, because it really pokes at, like I said earlier, you know, some of the two most urgent questions of humanity. You know, how did life begin? You know, how did it get here? Why is it the way it is today?
yeah, but so our answer would be life has always been everywhere, and it just was initiated on Earth 3 billion years ago when the
Right.
first green algae decided to grow here. It was probably deposited here. And then we had a period, literally for billions of years, there was nothing alive here but that one thing. And accidentally, that one thing for billions of years was creating oxygen, and it completely changed the environment over billions of years. And then we had an explosion of life once we had oxygen.
Right.
So it's a storybook. How does life come to a planet? Well, it comes from space, and it's initiated by cosmic rays. It's forged by cosmic rays in space and delivered to these planets. And then it mutates the life on the planets through millions of years of bombardment. And that's how
Yeah.
we get dinosaurs and Tyrannosaurus Rex and then humans.
Right. There's a really interesting sentence at the end of, did you even show the paper, the 2022 paper, identifying the wide diversity of extraterrestrial purine and pyrimidine nucleobases in carbonaceous meteorites?
Did you send that to me? I don't have it.
You sent me this paper last week.
Oh.
This was the paper that's saying we found the nucleobases in the meteorites.
Yeah.
And there's a very interesting sentence at the end of it's several sentences. If I'm just going to read it aloud, and then I'll share my thoughts on this. It says, although the formation of these nucleobases from concentrated source materials such as HCN, formamide, urea, and from highly reduced atmospheres have been reported in previous studies, the accumulation of these scarce molecules has substantial geochemical challenges on Hadean Earth, right? So talking about Earth like 4.5 billion years ago, with an atmosphere possibly dominated by CO2 and nitrogen. Hence, we expect that the exogenous base pairs contributed to the emergence of genetic properties for the earliest life on Earth. So the reason I read that whole thing out loud is because one of the things that it makes me realize is that, and this may not be correct, but they're kind of saying that it's kind of a mystery how these materials, the nucleobases, would accumulate and survive in Earth's earliest form, which is very interesting, right? Because what that suggests is that, yes, the nucleobases came from outside of Earth, because they would not have survived early Earth. They didn't come with the package. They weren't already here when Earth formed. You know, they're saying also that it would be hard to actually form them geochemically early on. Well, maybe that's not correct. I mean, maybe the Earth is geochemically in such a state, or was in such a state, let's say 2 billion years later, where it wouldn't be so difficult to form these things, because it's not like the elements weren't there. because they
Right.
certainly
And
were.
we have millions of impacts on the surface of the earth as evidenced by the moon. So
Right.
it's not just the moon getting hit. We're getting bombarded just as much as the moon. It's just that we have erosional processes on earth that erase that.
Well, we
So,
also have atmospheric protection, right? So not everything's actually going to hit us.
well, if it doesn't, it's going to burn up and there's still going to be those molecules in our atmosphere, which could
Right.
rain down on earth.
Right.
And
Right.
so after we literally, and then there's cosmic dust. It's like we've talked about this, 4,000 tons annually rain down on the surface.
Right. Right.
So it gets deposited continuously for millions of years until something critical happens and then life goes boom.
Yes.
Yeah. And what's sparking this? Like it's the cosmic rays that's driving it. And interestingly enough, cosmic rays are initiating lightning in our upper atmosphere. It's like cosmic rays do everything.
Right.
It's crazy.
Well, and it reminds you again that energy really is everything. I just sent you the actual paper that found the nucleobases in the meteorites. And like I said, there's other work that's been done on this before. So it's not the first time this has been done, but this is the most complete thus far, and this is using a technology that does less destruction to the materials.
The 2008 paper?
No, 2020. Oh, what? I thought this was, maybe I'm just getting my papers mixed up. I thought this was 2022.
Oh, it says 2008 and it's revised in 2022.
Oh, interesting.
It was published, republished 26 April 2022.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so we definitely need to look for the analysis of asteroids for these materials, because that's probably been done by now. Huh. It's funny. I was under the impression this was much more recent.
Well, they did something in 2022 to publish this.
Yeah.
Or maybe the 2008 is just the article number. Do you see that?
No, it's 2008. I see it elsewhere. It's the date.
Okay.
Oh, no, wait a minute. No. It is. I'm sorry. Yes, it is 2022. 2008 is...
the article number.
It might be... yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay.
So regardless, this will all be linked below.
Yes.
So if you want to read any of these papers, just go get it. Remember, don't be scared. Just use Grok if you have questions. If you don't know what a word is, just Google it.
Yeah, I'll say it.
Or ask Grok to explain it to you. It's that simple.
Yeah. I encourage all of our viewers to go look at the papers that we're talking about yourselves, because we're well aware of folks out there that report on scientific studies and claim that they came to a certain conclusion that they didn't actually come to. I mean, we've witnessed this happen recently. And I don't know why anybody wants to do that exactly. I mean, I have some ideas, but it's very disingenuous and unfortunate. So don't rely on anybody to summarize any scientific information for you. Please go look at it yourself. It's not that difficult to read. You don't even, I mean, you can use Grok, but you don't even necessarily have to. You know, some Google searches for the definitions of words can help you read something.
Yeah, don't believe the hype. Go look for it yourself.
Yeah. There's another...
you don't want to talk about the lightning?
Oh. Well, can I just mention this first because it's more along the panspermia thing?
Yeah.
You sent me another interesting article last week about this sort of discovery that, the title of the article is Your DNA is Full of Ancient Viruses, and they're running the show, which is interesting. So apparently about half of our genome is comprised of what's been called junk DNA, that is left over from viruses that are millions of years old. I mean, this is an important thing to mention as well, because there's a theory out there that viruses play a big role in evolution of organisms as well. And that may be true along with things like radiation. But it's very interesting to me because so what they're talking about here is that a lot of this material seems to appear as like an on-off switch for certain genes. You know, we all have genes that aren't expressed. And I'll just give you an example. I did a genetic analysis of my, like, basically my SNPs, my sort of little mutations a couple years ago. And one of the things that came up was that I have all of the genes for having celiac disease, but I don't have celiac disease. So I have the genes for it, but the gene has not expressed. So in this situation, what that also means is that the junk DNA, the old million year viruses, they haven't turned that gene on for me.
So what you're saying is you have good genes?
God, I'm so tired of hearing about that stupid commercial. Anyway, but so it's the same, it's kind of the same concept, right? Like it's the quote unquote junk DNA, which is apparently not junk, turning things on and off. But likewise, probably a live virus can probably turn genes on and off. Radiation surely can turn genes on and off. We know that environmental things can turn genes on and off, right? Like one of the ideas out there is that our environmental exposure, let's say to toxins, can trigger a gene to turn on that maybe causes cancer or something like that. So again, it's like there's this incredible continuity of life. It's present in our genome that has pieces that are from ancient history, within us, that is still having an effect on our lives today. And I find that really fascinating. And I think that continuity again kind of speaks to this idea of life is ubiquitous and it's everywhere.
Right.
Like
And
all the
it's
seeds
not
are here.
necessarily going in a more complex direction, in one direction. It's going
That
wherever it has to go.
Yeah, I think that's also true, right? And I think we have this perception maybe that it's goes from simple to complex simply because that was the process on Earth, because it had to start on Earth at some time, right? But it's not like the life didn't exist elsewhere, is what we're getting at.
And I find it fascinating to think about energy, and entropy and life. So you've got all these organisms that are alive. They have a life force, an energy. And when they die, that life force continues. It doesn't die with the animal. The animal dies, right? So where does that energy go? It goes back into the system and it gets recycled because it's infinite. Matter cannot be created nor destroyed, or else we get a nuclear explosion, correct? So our souls, our energy, like I was listening to a guy, he said, have you ever seen a man die? And he was like thinking about it, and he's like, I saw a dead body, but does the person die? Does the life force doesn't just turn off? It doesn't get canceled.
Right. It doesn't get erased.
There's no, or else there would be a nuclear explosion.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing that's interesting to me about that, I mean, I'm thinking of, I have certainly witnessed many animals die, right in front of my face. And there's that moment where it's very clear to you that the soul energy is not there in the body anymore. Like it's not something you see or smell or hear, you're not using your regular senses. It's an instinctual thing that you just witness. And I think it's hard for us to describe because at least, and I'm kind of thinking about all our understanding of this is in terms of the Yuga cycle, like our understanding of the relationship or the similarity between soul energy and other forms of energy like radiation, light, heat, electricity, all of that. Like, I don't think we have a clear understanding of how those things are all interrelated. Maybe we will in a higher state of the Yuga cycle.
Yeah, what's fascinating is that the universe is such a complex process. If you think about how it's now broken down into galaxies, which have, millions of solar systems within them, each galaxy is light years apart from other ones. In order for this to slowly develop into this system where all the building blocks of life are moving around the universe, viruses and DNA are storing information that is millions of years old in humans, which aren't even millions of years old. It's this. And then they say that there's a beginning, like just 18 billion years ago. That is not enough time to get to where we are now. 18 billion years would not create such a perfect system that we have here. It's got to be far older. For something to be this complex, I would think it would have to be trillions of years old, at least. It's just strange how people are okay constraining it to like 15 billion years ago was boom. And like we get this now, I doubt it.
Well, I mean, again, it's a function of like we're very committed to this idea that there has to be a beginning. There must be a beginning, right? And I understand, like, I get why we're committed to that, because that's actually how we experience our lives on Earth, a beginning and an end, right? But this is we live in a perception of time being linear, where everything has to have a beginning and an end.
There is no end.
I mean, the true nature of the universe is probably not that at all.
Yeah, human life should be looked at as a beginning and then a beginning.
Right. Well, what? Say that again? Human.
It shouldn't be life. It should be a beginning at birth and then a beginning as you transcend into the non-body form. That's the beginning of the next phase.
Right.
Not the end of anything.
Right. It's cyclical. The idea being that it's cyclical, right?
Yeah. So death is not the end. It's the beginning of what comes next.
Correct. Right.
And you might just be back here in another body. Or somewhere else.
I mean, and to me, the issue with this perception of time and then that marrying us to this very linear picture where there's a beginning and end to everything, it's very much like gosh, I'm trying to I don't remember. I think the book is written by a Japanese scientist, Michio Kaku, and I can't remember the name of the book right now, but this is a book about multidimensional physics, essentially. And it kind of starts with, trying to help somebody imagine a life beyond 3 dimensions, right? Like if there are more dimensions than that. So imagine you're a 2-dimensional being. So you're like a little drawing of a human on a piece of paper. You just have the y-axis and the x-axis. And imagine being that flat 2-dimensional creature and trying to experience 3 dimensions. You only have the ability to see 2 dimensions, but you're actually living in 3 dimensions. And so you go through like some 3-dimensional object, and all you're going to, like, if you were to move through it, all you're ever going to see are just individual planes in that 3 dimensions. And I think maybe our experience of time is kind of like that. Like, I think perhaps we perceive it linearly because that's what we're capable of perceiving. Yeah. But it may be, cyclical as we seem to. I mean, that's what seems to be suggested by everything that we look at all the time. That we go through cycles in our solar system, that we go through cycles on Earth, that we have cycles of our own existence in terms of, let's say, reincarnation, that we have the Yuga cycle where we kind of like reach the bottom of the cycle and we forget all of the amazing things that we knew, 13,000 years before.
Yeah.
And then we come back and we learn it all again, only to forget it again. And I think there's a spiritual purpose to that. I think that if we're ever going to learn anything as spiritual beings, like, I believe that we come into each individual life in order to learn something new. But if we remembered everything that we learned from previous lives, there probably wouldn't be that much to learn, or we would know too much to get a fresh lesson in something. And I kind of think that the Yuga cycle functions the same way, that we as humanity have to forget in order to learn something important. Otherwise, all the previous knowledge clouds our learning in some way.
Yes, that's why the soul is infinitely recycled.
Right. Right.
And sometimes there's glitches. There's like little kids, 2 to 5 years old, that remember their whole past life.
Yeah, that's
That's
a
what's
very
creepy.
interesting phenomena that you don't hear a lot about in the Western world. You
Yeah,
hear a lot more about it in the Eastern world simply because people are more accepting of the idea of reincarnation, right? But there's lots of examples of children, usually under the age of 5 and 6, who remember past lives, sometimes with incredible detail, like
right.
even to the point that they can take you to the house that they lived in their previous life, you know? Um, and for a lot of cases where this has happened, people have really looked into, can we actually confirm that this person remembers something that there's no other way for them to remember it except through past life. And that's been done in a number of cases, and it's really fascinating stuff.
Indeed. Speaking of fascinating, how about this lightning bolt?
Yeah. Oh my God.
So that is the October 2017 515-mile lightning bolt from Texas through Missouri. Now, bolts like this, take a guess. How long do you think that took to propagate?
Uh, I mean, it couldn't have been more than like 5 seconds.
Well, they have the previous was like 17 seconds at 470
Wow, really
miles.
that long?
They don't give
I
a
guess
time to this one. They just have the model
I
from the
guess I'd
ghost.
have to do the math, right? Because I guess you have to consider the speed of light in this equation to figure this
17
out.
seconds of discharge. Now, what they're
Fascinating.
finding is these discharges are emanating from some reaction up in the ionosphere, which then filters back down, creating the lower discharge.
Mhm.
And we also know we've got red sprites above. So this is an electrical circuit that can plasma in glow mode at different elevations based on probably charge potentials.
Mhm.
That's the only difference. So we've got ionospheric lightning, we've got red sprites, you come down into jets, and then you get lightning on this down in the atmosphere here. And it's all related to something that's coming from the sun or space, interacting with the ionosphere, and then projected down to the earth. And so I think we've discussed this on other shows. There are sunspots, right? The
Mhm.
sunspots are the same as earth spots, and an earth spot would be a low pressure system, which is a weather
Mhm.
system,
Mhm.
which could be a hurricane or just a front moving. Those
Mhm.
are earth spots. So those are electrical hotspots moving across the earth, as opposed to the sun having sunspots.
Mhm.
That's the difference. And you can get plasma in glow mode. And what's interesting is some of these I think they call them mega bolts. I don't read the article. It'll be linked below. A lot of these are just in the last few decades.
I was wondering about that. Is this a newer phenomena? At least newer to us?
You would expect, based on the weakening magnetosphere, you would expect bigger, longer, stronger lightning,
Right.
because more energy from space is going to be affecting our weather systems at the surface.
Yeah.
And it might get crazy. The Thunderbolts project, there's a lot of guys in there that think that a lot of the features on Earth are from giant lightning bolts, like the Grand Canyon.
Mhm.
Was a
Mhm.
plasma discharge bolt, some type of
Right.
plasma lightning that we have not yet seen. We're not in the correct environment for that to occur, but maybe in the future we'll be in that environment as the magnetosphere weakens.
Right, because if you really spend some time looking at Google Earth or something like that, um, you'll find that there's all kinds of structures on Earth that have this dendritic structure,
Mhm.
which can be replicated in a laboratory with plasma, right? So the Grand Canyon is an example of that. One day I was looking at the Ozarks and I realized they're all totally dendritic.
Lichtenberg pattern.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what it's
yeah,
called.
and they're all over. They're everywhere. Some places we can't see it, probably because it's been recovered with sediment. But looking in the Southwest is a good place to look, because there's not so much sedimentary deposit.
Well, there's also erosional patterns that create dendritic patterns. So
Okay,
you can have both.
okay,
You
yeah,
don't just have to have one.
right,
So you'd have to go out there and do some geology to figure out if your idea is correct.
sure.
A lot of these plateaus that are dendritic and thought to be from plasma discharge have a cap of basalt on them. So that would be evidence of the discharge. You've got the lightning bolt literally vaporizing the rock, and you get a sputter of the molten, it would be, molten rock instantly sputtering out and depositing a cap on the outer edge of the discharge.
Right.
I haven't gone out to investigate it, but I've seen some videos on people that have found that relationship. So that's interesting. The biggest thing to know about lightning, if there's lightning, do not go outside and stand under a tree. Do not hold an umbrella in a lightning storm, especially if it's made of metal.
And don't hold like a cordless phone or something like that.
Yeah, go inside under a structure and stay there until the lightning passes.
And
I was on a
maybe
mountaintop once, and an electrical storm moved through. All of our hair stood up. You could taste like electricity in your mouth, and the air was crackling. We got the hell out of there.
You have to.
Oh my God. And then like a mile down the slope, we were on the top of Wheeler Peak in Great Basin in southern Nevada. We got down about a mile, and the hail started. It was like 2-inch hail, and there was no shelter. So we had to hold up this tarp over our heads, and our fists got smashed by this hail, but it was better than our heads getting smashed by it.
Yeah.
And when it was done, it was like a foot of hail we had to slosh down to get to the parking area.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same reason why, when people hike the Continental Divide Trail here, which people tend to do in the summer, it's not particularly accessible in the winter. You have to hike in the morning, because in the afternoon, the thunderstorms come this time of year because it's monsoon season. And I've heard stories of people trying to hike in the afternoon up there, and they're in an area where there's no cover anywhere. You are the target, and you're just running from lightning. You don't want to do that.
Sounds like fun. Well, that was a great show, guys. Thank you all for joining us exclusively tonight on Rumble for our science show. This will get replayed on Wednesday on our regular YouTube channel, Magnetic Reversal News.